Thank you very much for coming, everybody. We're going to have a conversation about what Bitcoin is, blockchain, and all the other good stuff. A few questions you want to ask is, who am I and why would you listen to me? I'm a local guy. I run, my day job is Chief Wealth Strategist for a firm in Valley Forge. Nobody ever wants to hear from a financial advisor. I know that, even I don't want to hear from it. But my background is an MBA in technology management. Used to work for Unisys many moons ago. And I'm recently retired from the NFL Players Association. So if I can, and I was one of 200 people in the world authorized to work with football players. So if I can explain to someone who's in the equivalent of a car accident every weekend this stuff, then I can explain it to you. And one of the things I think I have as a skill set is taking something very complicated and explaining it to someone and in a way that you can understand it. Sales 101, when you're starting as a financial advisor, they want you to use big words. And I never agreed with that because the smarter I sound, the less likely you're listening because it goes over your head. So at any point, if I say anything, stop me and explain it to me. And I'll explain it to you in a way that you can understand it. Read a study that in 20 years, about 40% of the jobs are going to go away. And we all know, that there's things changing, but I don't think any of us can really grasp the concept of how fast things are changing. So studies have shown that the rate of change has now surpassed the rate of comprehension that the human mind can absorb. And I think we all have friends, and maybe this is some of you guys in the room, who gave up after the fax machine. Like at the end of the day, that's the only technology they were going to learn, and they're never going to learn something else. So I really admire you coming out to hear about something that is kind of weird and maybe even unfamiliar, because it's going to affect everybody in this room. I don't even know what you do, but I can guarantee you it'll affect you. Maybe not today and maybe not tomorrow. So a little bit of historical perspective. We are, if you take a stroll back in memory lane, for Bitcoin and blockchain and all that stuff, we are in 1994 relative to the internet. So back in 1994, you wanted to know a phone number, you put your AOL disk in, you dialed it, you had that of the phone on the baud modem, and you type in the name, and it would have been so much easier if you just went to the Yellow Pages to look up the name. Like at the time, it was so much easier just to do that, and that's kind of where we are now. So I can't even begin to tell you how far this will go, but I want to explain to you what the concept is, because it's something that is really different than what we're typically used to. This is not an investment course. I am not asking you or even inviting you, and I'm actually telling you not to, unless you truly understand it. This is a Bitcoin 101, blockchain 101. What is it? Why do people care about it? And why is it on the news all the time? So I'm going to talk in analogies so you can kind of understand it. Because before you know where we are, you got to understand, and there's things that you now take for granted. So the poor people that made HTTP and TCP/IP, they made no money. They made absolutely no money. I don't know who they are. You don't know who they are. People that made money were the people that wrote on top of that protocol. Facebook, Twitter, everything that you have on your phone that uses HTTP and TCP/IP and all the other fun acronyms that I can't talk about right now. Those people, made the money. Facebook made the money. And what's changed now is with blockchain, and I'll explain to you all this stuff. If you think of blockchain as the app store, Bitcoin is just one app. So the conversations about Bitcoin, the thing we need to spend time on is blockchain, because that's the thing that's going to change a lot of stuff. And it's weird, and it's math, and it's computers, and it's anti-centralization. There's a lot of things out there that are good about it, and there's a lot of things out there that are not only bad or maybe be bad, but there's a lot of unknowns. And that's really what is interesting. And because of the rate of change, you need to at least be aware of this stuff before it hits you on the side of the face. And frankly, as a species, we had 100 years to go from agricultural to industrial. None of us have time, and none of us have any idea how fast things are going to change. And what you and I take for granted, our kids won't even recognize because it'll change so much. And again, like I said, we're getting to the point where the rate of change is much faster than our comprehension, and that can't be good for anybody. And no one's slowing it down, so it's not necessarily going to be something that we can slow down. So if you think of the poor guys that made and TCP/IP, they made no money. The opposite is the protocol of blockchain rewards the people that are doing the work, and that's the mining that we talked about. So in a basic level, if you think of right now, the internet is digital abundance. There's a picture of me that I don't want out. I have no idea, and you say, "Hey, Fred, I have a picture, $100. I'll give you the, I'll give you the picture." I have no idea whether he put it up to his cloud. He could have sent it to 17 other people. That picture could be anywhere, and so we have digital abundance, and at the same time, we're in a trustless environment. If you're thinking of the internet, so I have Eagles tickets. I want to sell them. You want to buy them. I say, show me the money. You say, show me the tickets. I say, show me the money. We don't enter Ticketmaster. Ticketmaster validates that you have the cash and that you want my tickets. Validates I have the tickets and that I want his cash, and we agreed on the price. Ticketmaster won't be here in 10 years because the technology of blockchain will do all that without anyone having to be involved. And the sad part is a lot of the people that lost their jobs in manufacturing, if they didn't see it coming, their spouses and their family kind of did. You see technology in the manufacturing kind of what one guy can do, 30 guys used to be needed to do the same thing. When blockchain starts to come out, it'll be the middle management, it'll be the jobs that, you'll never replace me. I'm a knowledge worker, I work for Ticketmaster and I make sure all these trades are okay and I validate all the people. They're not going to be here. So one of the things that blockchain does is it will ensure digital scarcity. And that's an important part. So we're in a digitally abundant world. You can have many pictures of something that you don't want out there, or you can, but you think about what would you use digital scarcity for? Medical records. Bitcoin is just one example of using blockchain to validate and ensure digital scarcity. It's almost 10 years old, and it's almost about $200 billion. So if it was broken into, it probably would have been broken into when it was about $1 billion. And one of the reasons it really can't be brought,
You're talking about Bitcoin. I thought that was a currency.
Bitcoin is a virtual currency. It's a cryptocurrency, but it's just one of many cryptocurrencies.
And what is something changed?
So blockchain is the protocol and the concept that makes Bitcoin work.
Oh, it's the underlying.
So it's to HTTP and TCP/IP is to the internet. Blockchain is to digital scarcity. It just happens to be the thing behind Bitcoin, but it won't just be Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So one of the things that if you Google what's in development for blockchain, it's some amazing stuff. There is an app out there that uses blockchain, and I'll explain to you what blockchain is, and that's where it gets a little bit in the weeds. You don't need, unless you're going to code, you don't need to know how it works, but I'll give you the general broad brush. But there's an app out there that is like Uber, but it's not on the Uber system. So it'll validate any insured driver who wants to be a driver, and it'll let any paying customer, who is who they say they are, hire anybody anywhere. The other thing that I saw is voting. If you want to have a secure vote, the blockchain is the technique to do that. So why is it so secure? Because the ledger, which is the list of every transaction, is constantly added to. So on the one hand, you read the government doesn't like it so they can't control it, and that's probably true. On the other hand, the government loves it because the ledger is a locked in stone from day one. So the first Bitcoin transaction is in the blockchain. It's already there. The one that just happened yesterday is in the blockchain. And in order for me, let's say we figure out how to break the blockchain, and I put in that Fred has, I should have probably told you my name. Anyway, my name's Fred. Has 10 billion 10 billion Bitcoins. All the other ledgers out there, all the other blockchain copies, says, do you have that in yours? No. So the second mine is different than everyone else's, it's discarded. So the only way I could take over Bitcoin is by knowing absolutely every computer that's there, which no one knows, have access to the computer, which no one does, and at the same instant copy my ledger to everyone's ledger. Never going to happen. And if it was going to happen, it would happen when there's 5 computers on it and it was worth a couple $100 million. It's now on 7 million computers. And one of the things that makes it work is a concept called mining. So although everything that's ever done on Bitcoin, and we'll use Bitcoin as a specific instance of using blockchain, because it gets, we need to borrow that marijuana store if you want to really get deep in some of this stuff. So we'll use Bitcoin as the specific thing. It is a lot of work to validate the transactions, because you're talking a very large data set going back to the first day Bitcoin was around, and you have to validate the address it was sent to, the address it was, and so they call that mining. And they call it mining because there's a lot of data, and it's all math driven. And in order to have it work, the protocol, so the HTTP, i.e. the blockchain, will reward the miner, the computer that comes up with the answer the fastest. So you're rewarding quick calculations. And you get rewarded by a piece of the thing that you're mining. So if you're mining Bitcoin, one of the things that it factors in is how many people are on Bitcoin, how complex is the transaction. Based on how fast you are, that's how many, fractional of a share of a Bitcoin. So you're not going to make $10,000. You might make 40 cents. You might make $4 depending on how it is.
Who determines that?
It's all weighted. So the protocol does. There is no, it's whoever, we don't even know who started, and that's the other cool thing, or weird thing. We don't even know who wrote the protocol. It's some Chinese name, but we don't know if that's a fake name. But it is self-governing. So whoever wrote it has nothing to do other than hopefully he has kept some blockchains for, some Bitcoins
But
for
who
himself.
actually pays this miner?
The protocol does.
The protocol?
You have to have an authorized miner. I mean, it's all computer driven. We're talking cyborg level computer. I mean, not cyborg, but it's very complicated. You need to be authorized. You need a mining farm. There's a lot of stuff behind it. You do not make any money today mining Bitcoin.
Who's the authorizer?
The protocol will validate it. So mining it, there's software that's built just for that. And the software itself gets validated by the blockchain to make sure you're not a crook. I mean, there's a lot of checks and balances. You used to be able to buy a server and mine Bitcoin in your basement and make a couple $100. That's probably 6 years ago. Now, the work is so hard, so many people are using the protocol. Almost all of the mining has been done in Iceland, where power is free because they have geothermal. So, interestingly, socially, the work is moved to the country that has the cheapest electricity. So that's social Darwinism right there. It's okay, we're not going to reward the richest country, which would be America. We're going to reward the one that has the cheapest energy. So there's some social things in there. Shoot.
But how did it, go back to the original development? You said one guy came up with this idea.
We think.
And then how did all these blockchains and miners develop from that point?
So it was a little underground at the time, and it got a bad rap because it's untraceable. So once you have your Bitcoin address, which is free, you can send and receive Bitcoins. Now, what you do to send and receive Bitcoins, you have to do in the real world.
Was the original guy doing all this?
He just wrote the protocol. They think he's a mathematical genius that is kind of crazy and might even be dead by now. We don't know who he is, so we have no way.
How did anybody pick up on it to say, well?
It was used. So it was there's probably books written about this, and I don't want to misspeak. So what I know is that at the time, people that didn't want to be traced were searching for a way of sending value without being traced. And so the very first people in Bitcoin are not the people you want to be hanging out with. Drug dealers, murderers, people on the dark web looking for some horrible stuff. And that's unfortunately where it began, but that's not where you can now buy Microsoft products and use Bitcoin. So it's matured in the point where now it's legitimately.
So can you participate in this blockchain as a kind of open source user?
You can, yes.
Data?
So you can transfer fiat money into Bitcoin and back and forth. So you can ride the wave. And a few things about Bitcoin. There's a certain supply. There's a limited supply. So Bitcoin will never be any more Bitcoin than what the math can already, they already extrapolated how much it's going to be. So You'd have to Google it, it's a moving number, but basically there's a fixed amount of Bitcoin currency no matter what. And it will reduce itself over time. So there's an already built-in inflation factor, which is one of those things that, you know, because it's decentralized, the price of Bitcoin is only based on the demand for Bitcoin. And that's what we all control. Shoot.
As of today, you don't have to pay taxes on any profit that you make on Bitcoin, because the government doesn't get any 1099s as of today. So everybody that made millions of dollars don't have to pay any taxes on it.
That's still true. So when I do make millions of dollars on Coin app, which is the app that you can use to do this, I'm going to transfer it back to fiat money into dollars, and then I'm going to do something with it, then that'll be taxable. And now I have 10,000 hypothetically. If I put 1,000 in, it's worth 10,000. Now I have 10,000 of stuff I'm going to buy or spend. And because it's not backed by anything other than the demand, it could go to $2, it could go to 0. But because so many institutions are using it, that probably isn't as very likely. And one last question, getting to the why Ticketmaster will go away, the trustless society that we're in, the internet's a trustless society, maybe we're not, and the digital scarcity that we talked about, there are being written today smart contracts that are all code. It's all website, you know, all stuff out in the code, no people involved, that will allow you to log in or allow you to validate yourself and me to validate myself and say, I got tickets, you got cash, we agree on a price, and the contract without any institution like a Ticketmaster. And I'm picking on Ticketmaster because I think we can understand that as a third-party intermediary. Any place where there's a third-party intermediary to validate a transaction is where Bitcoin will shine.
So that means no more lawyers?
I hope. Probably not. Probably not. By that time, they'll make a rule that's illegal to do. You know, but a lot less lawyers and a lot less transactions. So I can send Bitcoin to you instantaneously without any transaction charge. Now, there are always going to be some fees because the miners get paid that piece of Bitcoin. The infrastructure is rewarding those people that are part of the infrastructure that make it work. So two pieces. Why did people use it? They wanted value, not traceable. The other thing is, you know, like any other society that's becoming, you know, we now have snowboarding on the Olympics. 15 years ago, snowboarding was not an Olympic sport, and the people that were in it, long hair, dreadlock, probably would use the Phoenixville, you know, dispensary for, you know, recreation. You know, now it's legitimate. So we are definitely there with getting there with Bitcoin. Ethereum is another cryptocurrency, and it's an open protocol. So the reason Bitcoin is as popular as it is it's open, and some people say, you know what, there's things that Bitcoin doesn't do great. And one of the things that kind of came out of it is when Bitcoin became $10,000 a coin, our brains don't really like to see transactions with very large amount of decimal points. You know, I get $15, but on Bitcoin that's 0.00000, you know, it's a long number that our brain's like, oh, I don't, you know, it doesn't look like real value. So all Ethereum is Bitcoin, but a tenth of the price. So Ethereum's about $800 now, but when it was high, it was at 1,000. You know, Bitcoin's at 10,000, and it's now about, you know, 9,700 or whatever. So we have digital scarcity. Anything that needs it, so medical records, we won't need, you know, your medical records can be on your own thumb drive, and that's your medical records to use anywhere. We've talked a lot about Bitcoin and Ethereum. That's all what's called a public blockchain, which is going to be what you hear about when you hear it in the news. And a public blockchain is that technique in which the ledger is distributed to a whole bunch of computers. Anyone that wants to mine and get a piece of it for the mining and get rewarded for being a fast and accurate miner. So let's say that you decided you wanted to mine Bitcoin and screw it up. For whatever reason, you will never be allowed to mine again. And so you're going to waste resources. And that's the one thing that it kind of counts on is self-preservation. You're not going to want to spend resources to do the calculation only to have you flub it up, because then you just wasted your money for nothing. And so there's a self-regulating element of the mining. There's that social element of the cost of mining going to the cheapest source of energy, because that's a big part of all this is the computer being run.
Do they actually know the personality, the person themselves who are the miners, or could it be a
You know the address.
corporation?
You know the address. You know how
But I
many
mean, the
miners they
actual
have.
person?
No.
Maybe a robot.
No. So how, you can, you're completely anonymous.
Absolutely.
So if you do something bad and they say you're done, you just go across the street and
Sure.
set up another mining
But you
operation.
just wasted money for whatever you did. Like you just spent time calculating a component of the ledger that either, the thing you could do bad is you tried to corrupt the data. So if your ledger was corrupted but no one else's is, they're gonna say yours is bad. And when I say they, I mean it's code. It's no one, it's decentralized. We never have to do anything again and Bitcoin will still be around. That's the interesting part of it.
So the computer makes the decision.
The math.
The
It's
software
all,
in the computer
it's all math
decides you're
driven.
bad, you're good.
Yeah, so on your credit card, using a credit card example, did you ever fat finger by accident your credit card number and instantly tells you it's a bad credit card number? It's because the numbers of the credit card have a mathematical equation, and you can look it up on the internet, but basically, without knowing it's your credit card, the way the numbers, when you fill out the numbers on the credit card into the equation, it comes out with an answer, and the computer instantly knows that answer means it wasn't a credit card number. So there's certain numbers that have to be our credit card number. So just as an example of the math, I mean that's the kind of math we're talking about, a lot of algorithms. The digital scarcity part and the public blockchain is what you see every day with Bitcoin and Ethereum and everything else. Where it's going to impact most people, and we're probably 6-7 years from this, is the private blockchain. So the difference is Bitcoin's private, Bitcoin's public, open protocol, anyone can use it, no one can use it. You now can use it for legitimate things. You can pay for things with Bitcoin. It has a real value. Obviously, it's going all over the place. Knowing that there's a limited supply of Bitcoin and knowing that the amount of Bitcoin over time will diminish gives it value. That's one of the things that gives it value because there's less supply and there's more people coming online to use it cheap.
Well, what kind of things can be purchased with the Bitcoin when there's only a limited amount of Bitcoin to be had?
Well, think of Bitcoin as dollars. They don't care where you're spending it, they care the value of the dollar. So I'll send you the spreadsheet, but there's Microsoft, you can buy stuff, Dell, I mean, there's a lot of companies.
Each Bitcoin is $10,000.
Right, but you can have-
Could I buy a house with it? And how do I pay somebody?
You would probably not want to pay for Bitcoin, only because title insurances would want at settlement US dollars. So you
Well,
would
yeah,
take the
but
Bitcoin.
What kind of things can you buy with Bitcoin?
I would say anything electronic. I mean, a lot of things that are like Microsoft, software,
Wow.
and it keeps getting bigger. It
Yeah.
keeps getting, and the list keeps getting bigger. The important part is, let's pretend for a second you don't trust the government. We're not going to go there today, and that you decide that you want to leave the country. You can sell everything, convert it to dollars, go in the Coin app, put it into Bitcoin, transfer it to a wallet, and I didn't bring it, but it's a little thumb drive. You can put $2 million on that thumb drive. Don't forget the password because you're screwed if you forget the password. But now you can take that, hasn't been taxed, no one knows it's there, put it in your pocket, leave the country, go into any computer in the world, and reverse, and there's all your money. So there is a lot of good that can be done with that, a lot of bad that can be done with that. But the thing that's going to impact you the most, and the reason I wanted to do this, because this isn't my full-time job, is the study I read, 20 years, 40% of the jobs will be gone. And so you unpack that, and like, how's that happening? I know Uber someday, not everyone's going to be an Uber driver because all of our cars will drive itself. I get that part of it because you kind of can see it coming. With a private blockchain, so we discussed the public blockchain, it's a ledger that's diversified, it is uncorruptible after it gets to be a certain size because now it's so dispersed that you can never get to it. And the protocol itself keeps things kind of going. It gets bad actors out. It rewards those that do the calculations fast and accurate. Gives them Bitcoin. Private blockchain is when, and today there are companies doing this. So private equity companies, the Bain Capital, Carlyle, the companies that we don't hear about until after they're done doing their thing. And I'm using Dana as an example of a private company, not an example of someone that's doing this. But if you can take companies that are related but aren't the same company, and you can use blockchain technology to reduce whatever the friction is. So title insurance would be an example. Maybe healthcare, you get a hospital and a doctor, you know, a lot of overhead. But if you can have something that is without people involved, validates the digital scarcity of whatever you're talking about, and make sure that it is correct, accounts payable, accounts receivable, like pretty much anyone in finance in a big corporation, someone's going to have to be left to like make sure it's not. But once the blockchain's written, it just validates it and it does what it needs to do. So the private blockchain will be the technology that will replace a lot of people, especially the people that think their job's not replaceable, which is a little bit scary. Shoot.
Could you give the definition of digital scarcity again?
Sure. So right now we have digital abundance. So you take a picture and you can duplicate that picture anywhere you want. If I tell you I want the master, there is no master of that picture because you could have copied it, sent it to your friends, it could be in your email. With the blockchain, it will, with a third-party verification, so I don't need to take your word for it that you deleted the photo. I'm using the photo as an example of just a, but I can use the blockchain to validate that you no longer, that photo no longer exists anywhere in the world. So it's able to, so you will know your medical files, where they are, and they're probably just on your, and you can allow people to see it, but using the blockchain, you'll know everyone who's ever seen your medical file forever.
Who would you go to get that information?
Well, it's not there yet. So this isn't anything that you can say, I want to put my medical file on the blockchain. It's a concept of, let's say your medical file does get, let's say they say medical records are going to use blockchain. 300 years from now, they can pull up your blockchain and see every address that's ever looked at your, you know, and addresses tend to cluster, so we'll know that these addresses are this hospital, or this address is, you know, your doctor. You know, the addresses tend to be, you know, they're anonymous, but you kind of know the addresses that are Russian because, you know, they have certain numbers that ours don't. Shoot.
Is that kind of what you're saying, to address the other question? Is that happening with all these competitors to Bitcoin? For example, I was reading there's 1,200 of them, 1,300
Yeah.
of them. Everybody's inventing a different type of Bitcoin. But is this blockchain that you're talking about, this kind of universal apparatus that's keeping everybody honest within all these competitors?
So think of blockchain as the protocol. So Kodak's a good example. They are developing, using blockchain, a way of validating and securing your photos. So that exact example, if I use Kodak's strategy, it's not out there yet, would allow me to know that if I delete this master, anyone that had a copy of it gets deleted. Because I've guaranteed that digital scarcity. So like the VHS and Sony days, Sony Beta was the better technology. I can't tell you that the best technology will win. I can't tell you Bitcoin 100 years from now will be here, but I can tell you that blockchain isn't going anywhere. And blockchain is where we are in 1994. We don't even know the ripples it's going to affect. So we're kind of talking in hypotheticals of medical records or voting, but there's trillions of dollars in finding ways to get rid of any kind of friction in business, any kind of friction in information. And there's so much that we would be comfortable with if we knew it was secure. The reason we don't like our medical files out there is we don't want it out there on the internet. We don't want to have someone call us, say, hey, you know, I know what you did last summer, I know your operation, and if you don't tell me, you know, don't pay me. And the other part about Bitcoin is because it's untraceable, it is the mechanism in which when you get scammed or when you get someone that is a fraudulent thing, you get an email and they'll say, hey, I got a picture, or I got, you know, I stole all the information off your hard drive, send me a Bitcoin, send me $300 in Bitcoin to this address. Now that address is real, but you don't know who's on the other end. And they wanted to be paid in Bitcoin because they don't pay taxes on it, and it's untraceable. So there are still bad actors, but they're using Bitcoin. Bitcoin didn't make them a bad actor. Shoot, I thought it'd be no question. This is
I am completely new to Bitcoin.
Good.
Can you walk me through an example of how one wants to, I guess the term is mine a Bitcoin.
Sure.
Walk me through the steps of what one would do to mine one, and then how they would use it to make a purchase.
Okay,
How
so,
does, like the whole
so
process
the
of
hardware
doing
for
this.
mining is very specific. I know this because I screwed it up. So 3 years ago, and again, my wife and I, we've agreed she's gonna be on top of music. I like my classic rock. I like my Phil Collins. But I know my 6-year-olds are gonna be listening to stuff that I'm just never gonna get, and so my wife's in charge of that. I'm in charge of technology. I'm in charge of, being on top of everything, and that's okay, because she likes that and I like this. So 3 years ago, I decided to dive in. I had to get mining software, which was free, and you put it on your computer, you set an account up that has an address that when you successfully mine something, if you earn the Bitcoin, fractions of the Bitcoin, we're not talking $10,000 here, it'll throw it at that address, and that address is mine, and I can grab it whenever I want, turn it into dollars, that's how I buy something in the real world, or I can leave it there and have it grow. So there's websites you go to set up your mining operation.
So what is a mining operation, and what is
Your hardware, your computer is tasked with validating and reconciling Bitcoin transactions that happen anywhere in the world. So that ledger that's everywhere is getting reconciled everywhere, every time. So your hardware, and this is why I know it's no longer feasible, I had a Mac, wasn't set up to do this. The next day, I had it running overnight, it takes forever. So the hardware, you're talking now, probably $6,000, $7,000 to build a box that's a beast enough to do the calculations. Because the ledger's so big, the amount of Bitcoin transactions are so large, in numbers. So you can't afford, typically, to make money after you put all the money aside for the hardware that does the calculations.
Is there a machine doing all this work herself?
Yeah, if you're electing to mine, then you are one of the 7 million companies, or 7 million computers that's doing the math behind the scenes that allow the transactions to work.
So
Well,
this-
each one of those computers might be a room filled, like this room filled
Absolutely, yeah,
with
there's server
servers.
farms.
With
There's,
servers.
right now, so one off, you can't make, it's server farms now, and
Yeah.
they're all a lot
And
nicer.
that's
So
just
they-
one, and that's just one computer, as you're saying.
So to answer your question, you set up your profile on a website that gives you the address. You say I want to mine, and so there's pieces of the transaction that the math says, okay, here's a snippet, do the work. So your computer is tasked with doing it. So you can't use your computer for anything else. Now if you thought, I came in the next day, my Mac was hot. Like it was hot to the touch. I hadn't, like it shows your progress bar, it was still a quarter of the way. Like it didn't do anything. I probably spent $900 in electricity, like this thing's running.
What is this transaction that gets?
It
that the
is
computer
a
does?
reconciling of the ledger of any and every Bitcoin transaction. So if you're gonna pay, I'll get you. If she's gonna pay me in Bitcoin, she says, I elect to pay this address, this amount of Bitcoin. And she puts it into the blockchain.
Uh-huh, okay.
Math is done to validate who she is. Did she have the money? Who am I? Is my address valid? And then remember, the blockchain is every transaction from day one.
Well, how
So
do-
it's
I
very
just-
large.
I still don't quite understand
Sure.
how one mines a Bitcoin.
So it's an app that runs. So it's an application that runs on a real computer in the real world, doing the calculations to make sure the ledger and keep the ledger up to date.
Do I need to pay any, like, you
You are
call it
gonna-
fiat dollars?
Right.
or-
So you don't have to pay anything to mine. Pico will bill you for the amount of electricity you're using, and that's going to go to you.
Okay.
And the hardware you need is now server farms are needed to break. So you used to be able to not buy a new computer and just do this in the background and make a few bucks. Like we're talking 10, 20 bucks. When you factor in the price of electricity, which is free in Iceland, it's a net loss. So today, because of the cost of electricity, the size of the blockchain, and the amount of work needed to reconcile it, the only people doing it are huge server farms
Yeah.
that have companies that spend millions of dollars, not necessarily to make money today, but to be in a position to be, when we're all paying for everything in a fast transaction, no transaction charge, when Ticketmaster isn't here, and you and I are buying Eagles tickets using blockchain, those server farms will be making fractional payments. Or Shannon, question?
Well,
Okay.
that's what I was getting at, like the normal person couldn't do this and make any money, because the big companies you mentioned, the stock trading
Yeah.
companies and all, they have these big supercomputers that can do it like that, and they get all the profits because they're the fastest.
So absolutely, and if you are a user, you want the technology to be done by the cheapest and fastest, because there's a limited amount of blockchain, or a limited amount of Bitcoin, using that as our example. The more I pay you for mining, the less supply of Bitcoin is out there for the rest of us, the more expensive our Bitcoin is. So I want the work done at the cheapest and fastest place in the world. And right now, that's server farms in Iceland.
If we're at the very beginning now, that like say 1/10 of 1% of what's gonna happen over the next 20 years, there ain't gonna be enough electricity in the world to support
Free
our
energy.
habit.
It is
Free energy.
In Iceland, it's free.
So it'll all be
It's all
solved very
geothermal.
soon.
Yeah, but
Thank you.
And computers will get faster. I mean,
you're
there'll
gonna have
be
to
a
put a server farm
self-adjusting.
on top of a volcano to get that energy, 20 years from now.
Yeah. So, I mean, Mark, you have a question?
From Mars.
The patron who couldn't be here tonight wanted me to ask this.
Okay.
She said that she heard that Bitcoin is not environmentally friendly. And is this true? And if so, what is being done about
All
that?
right, so Bitcoin, even if that was true, there's nothing we could do about it, because Bitcoin's it's an open source code. And I would say, if she searches on who is mining the most Bitcoin, we've already talked about it. It's Iceland with free energy. It's taking the business away from the guy, if Dell Computer had a server farm in Texas, they're not mining a lot. Because the Bitcoin protocol says, wait, this is cheaper and faster, we're going there. And Dell's gonna say, you know what, we're losing money every time we mine, we're taking our servers offline. Exactly. So the genius of blockchain, we can't even conquer. I mean, there's a lot of self-regulating math in there.
Was it the original guy who wrote this protocol?
We think it's a guy, we have
Well,
a name.
Whoever, but
Yeah.
he put this package together.
He wrote
Initially.
the platform that's out there, and he didn't keep anything for himself. So unless he has a mining farm somewhere, or unless, and maybe he has some of the Bitcoin, that's the supply that's out there that's known, and the
He's got the
supply,
key that turns everything off.
that's the risk, but he can't. Because it's not his anymore, it's not centralized. Shoot,
Do you think that he originally wrote it as a Ponzi scheme?
no, because he's not making any money.
There's only a limited amount. The people who got in first got the most money because there was the most to be had, and now it's filtering down where millions of people are trying to make money and they can't.
So, where money is being made isn't in the mining, because it's now too big for people to be competitive, and that's the way it should be. Frankly, 3 years ago, even I couldn't make money on it unless I went out and bought. I'm like, you know what, this is BS, I'm not gonna, So, from an investment standpoint, the concept, again, we don't know which blockchain technology, whether it's Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the other alt chains, and all these are currencies, for lack of a better term, based on the blockchain. So again, blockchain is the equivalent of the App Store. You can have a lot of different apps on the App Store, but it's all at the App Store. And the reason it's a good analogy is, especially on Apple's side, you don't just get on the App Store. It has to be validated, it has to be clean, you can't buy anything pornographic on the Apple App Store. And they got dinged for that because, you should be able to write any app, and if the world wants a dirty app, I should be able to buy it, and Apple says no. So, not that Apple has anything to do with blockchain, but the concept of blockchain is that concept of diversifying the ledger, of having math that validates the transactions, that having it so dispersed that no one can ever have the control. So even if the guy that wrote it decided, I'm going to change the ledger, he doesn't know, nor could he, every computer that's running it. And if I have my money in Bitcoin in my hardware wallet, I'm not even connected to the internet. So, shoot.
Well, I mean, that seems to be a very altruistic beginning. This guy, I think he was Japanese or something like that.
We think.
That started it.
Could be the NSA.
Didn't
we don't
trust
know.
anybody, so he invents something that goes out there and checks on every little last piece of data
You're
that there
talking
could
about
possibly be
Sure.
about the transaction. So now, then you read where you know, there's the bad guys that go in and try to steal this amount of money or amount of value that's at risk. How do they manage to do that if there's all these checks and balances
So where
along the way?
there's vulnerability is at a site that aggregates. So we talked about Coin app, which is an app that you can get on your phone, and they charge a fee, and they're a real company, and they're one of the biggest companies out there. But the app on your phone, you link your bank account, and you move real money into it, and then it's in US dollars, and then you can buy most of the legitimate cryptocurrencies. So Bitcoin, Ethereum, you're buying it on your phone, and they're doing the transactions. So where reliable is if someone hacks them, because they know who you are, and they have the math to figure out where the transactions are. Now, they've never been hacked. When they are being attacked, they slow down. They tell you your Bitcoin transaction will be 5 more days because we're doing security on the back end. So that's where you're not vulnerable is if Bitcoin gets transferred to your address, whether it's on the website or whether you put it on the hard. Once it's yours, no one can take it. So where they're vulnerable is when it's in that transaction where you've requested it, it hasn't yet been sent, and Coinbase is the intermediary because there's no other way for us to take real dollars to buy cryptocurrency. If they get hacked and data gets stolen, but it still hasn't happened, and I would say that with $200 billion worth of Bitcoin, it would have happened. $100 billion would have been the biggest heist in humankind history, and that was 6 years ago.
Yeah, but the bad guy's only doing it a little bit at a time when he finds it.
The algorithm prevents that. So if you're a bad guy, you look like a good guy. If you're a bad guy, say I want to change the ledger, and I want to make it so that it shows that you have 500 Bitcoin. Only your ledger will say that. The 7-8 million other computers will say, you know what, that doesn't match my math. You're out of here. So it's a so where Bitcoin was the most vulnerable was when it was on 5 computers and no one knew about it. Because hypothetically, if all 5 computers were in my house, I could delete all of them and rebuild it. It's now it's out there, 9 years, 10 years old, $200 billion worth of value, and that's just Bitcoin. There's these other coins. So Kodak's coming out with currency. So what you want to understand is a basic concept behind it is a dispersed ledger that ensures that data scarcity. It ensures that piece of data, whether it's Bitcoin, right now we're using Bitcoin as an example, or my medical files, or whether I voted Republican or Democrat in that instance, it will know that no one else had that, that was my vote. And so you will see a lot of technologies behind the scenes, and to you and I, it'll look like an app. Oh, look, I can buy tickets directly from you and I don't need Ticketmaster. Or next time you buy a house in 10 years, it's like this because the computer says, okay, you have the house, there's nothing against the house, it's yours, you don't need all that title insurance. So any place there's a third party that is validating a transaction is where blockchain will be, whether we want it or not. We'll do it, Rebecca. Ladies first.
My question, if blockchain is a public record and it records every transaction, how are things not traceable?
It's traceable to the address. We don't know who owns that address.
I see, all right, so if
So
nobody else knows my address, they won't ever know.
Right.
Okay.
And chances are you won't know it because like 13 letters and you have to,
know.
So there's a lot of hexadecimal in here. I mean, we can go down a rabbit. It's deep math. But where it will impact a lot of us will be in the synergies that we don't even know are there. That private equity saying, if I buy that company and I buy that company, even if I don't change their names, but I use a blockchain, private blockchain, just for those companies to use, there's about a third of the people we don't need anymore, because now we don't need accounts payable and accounts receivable. We can just have the blockchain say, okay, you said this. The computer says, yeah, we did send this. Did you pay for it? No. Go pay for it. It's all done. And that's where it's going to impact people that thought their jobs were safe.
Yeah, it seems like about 90% of all industries have people that are just brokers, like you say, the accountants, the auditors, all the auditors go away. So it's like 90% of these intermediary brokers who provide checks and balances, those jobs are going to go away.
How
And
long's
that's-
that theory been in the air?
Which one?
What, that you're just talking about now?
Well,
That the blockchain is gonna eliminate all these positions.
I think it's a logical next step for technology that reduces to zero the need of an intermediary. Like, you know, if it's digital, if we're talking digital information, so again, if you're gonna be a art broker, blockchain is not gonna help you. Because you need a physical person to look at the art and say, yeah, that's the right art. But if it's I mean, Kodak's doing it to try to be able to have people control their photos for that same exact reason. So they're not doing it for free, but they're doing it for a tiny, tiny piece of something that you don't even see. And the more people that use it, the cheaper it is for it. So again, there's always that startup cost. The voting thing, I think, is the most unique. I don't know if the government would ever want that, because if it's unhackable, but you want to have the ability to hack it, there's, you know, so proof's in the pudding, you know. And that's the, you know, that's the interesting part, is it's diverse. There's no interest rate. There's no Fed. I mean, there's some sociological, you know, elements of this that we don't know how it's going to play out. It's not taxed right now, which again, no governments want. But there are countries, Venezuela. I mean, there are countries out there that they're moving away from fiat currency. And all, just so we're all clear, all money is a shared hallucination. That's all money is. It's a shared hallucination. You take my dollar because you know someone else will take the dollar. The dollar has no value, especially after Nixon took it away from gold. So if I can pay you in Bitcoin and it's not taxed and it's not, you know, I can pay anybody anywhere. All they need is an internet address, a Bitcoin address for me to send it to, and it's anonymous, so I don't have to worry about you coming to my house saying, here, you know, I want to buy more Eagles tickets. You sold me the last. You don't know who I am. You got the Eagles tickets. I mean, that part won't be in question. The more legitimate it is, the more likely that the price of the Bitcoin and Ethereum, you know, and all of them will go up, because more people that use it got the demand, and we know there's a limited supply. Like, there's no question about it. The math of Bitcoin, of any blockchain, only takes it out to a certain degree, and so that's the amount of Bitcoin that will ever be available.
I think it's 13 million.
Something like that.
So the success of it is dependent on somebody that you want to buy something from, taking that as a means of exchange.
Right.
To go from, you know, this cryptocurrency to some fiat currency is probably not the way to go.
No, it takes that.
Because obviously you're going to be taxed, somebody knows
No,
who
you
you
can
are.
use, today you can use, and I'm using CoinApp as an example, something I personally use. I looked around, there's others out there, and maybe that won't be the best one in 5 years, but CoinApp is an app on your phone, and you can buy, you transfer real money from your bank account, not taxable, and you can buy any cryptocurrency. It takes a few days for it to come through, and when you do the transactions, one of the first questions asked you is, do you want it fast or cheap? Can't have both.
Fast or cheap what?
The transaction, when you transfer, you know, when you go from Bitcoin to real money or Bitcoin to your hardware, there's math that needs to be involved to validate I'm the person getting it. And so you have a choice. You can do fast or cheap. So I did fast just for, as my mom would say, you know, giggles. Should use another word instead of there. But suitable for, you know, daytime TV. I transferred $100 and I said fast, and it cost me $26, which I never would have done. I just wanted to know what fast was. I got it like that. I'm like, I didn't want it like that, you know. So I'd rather be slow. And slow is a couple days. We're not talking weeks or months or whatever. Did you have a question? I'm sorry.
No, I'm just, can
Yeah.
you talk more about Bitcoin and blockchain and how it's going to affect us?
Sure. So the blockchain is the app store that we don't even have all the apps written yet. We have no idea what it's going to be, but it could be voting, it could be medical. And all it's using is the concept of a diversified ledger that the protocol itself, so in this case the HTTP or the HTTP protocol, is the platform in which the work is being done. And unlike TCP/IP where no one got paid, if you use the protocol and you're part of the solution, you're solving for the transaction, you're getting paid minutely, very, very small piece, based on the work you do. So the more complicated or the more resources you donate to mining, the more your reward is. That makes sense? So that's just blockchain, that's everywhere. And right now, one of the apps is Bitcoin, and it's using that blockchain, and that's the public. Now, the reason we know it's public is that's how it was built, and it's open source, so the code itself is open. You can't tell Bitcoin that you have all the Bitcoin. It'll know that's not true. But you can look at the Bitcoin code and say, okay, I'm going to use blockchain coding technology and make Etherium, which is a different version, just another currency. One of the reasons Ethereum is something we want to talk about is right now, most of the smart contracts, which is the code that says, you know, I want to write a blockchain application that eliminates Ticketmaster, for this example. All of those smart contracts are using Ethereum as the mechanism because it's only $1,000, not $10,000. So when you go to say I want $500 of Ethereum, it's going to be a much more visually acceptable number to your brain versus 0.0000000 of Bitcoin. You know, the computer doesn't care. It's $500, whether it's this many Ethereum or 0.000 this many Bitcoin. But our heads, our brains are like, you know, looks like I'm getting, you know, 2 cents versus 0.5. So where we're seeing it today is really in Bitcoin. It got frothy when everyone's talking about it. I mean, I've done 3 or 4 classes besides this, and we get maybe 8. I always come in this no matter what because I'm getting rid of, you know, I'm getting out of giving a bath. So edit that out in our post-production. But it's something that we're all out there. So is it a good investment to mine? Probably not anymore. Was when no one knew about it, because the hardware and the resources donated to it aren't going to be worth the Bitcoin you get back for the mining of it. Now that could change. Let's say that, you know, the volcano takes Iceland out, takes all those servers offline.
Oh dear.
Now the price of Bitcoin will go up because there's less people doing the work, so you'll get rewarded with your Phoenixville server, maybe. Again, it's a horrible example, but it's a supply and demand math. It's really just that simple. The other thing that you're looking at is there's a lot of smart people looking at their own company and looking at merging into other affiliated companies and using that blockchain technique to kind of be the code that runs the company. So if you don't need people in accounts payable, you don't need people in accounts receivable, there's a lot that the blockchain can free up those resources to not be needed and get fired, or to be more strategic and say, okay, I don't have to reconcile the books all day. Now I'm going to look and see what other new businesses should the company get into. So it's not all bad news. What it is, though, is a whole new, you know, if the 80s were the digital time, I don't know what they're going to call this in 10 years. I look back because there's no word for it yet. But it will be, you know, hardware keeps getting faster, AI. I mean, you add blockchain and AI, I have no idea what that means, but it won't be predictable. It won't be bad or good. You know.
So with Bitcoin, if there would be another cryptocurrency that gains favor for some reason, that is how it would devalue.
Exactly. If less people use it and less people so if more people mine it and less people use it, the price will go down. Because now everyone's doing all the work and no one's using it. Does that make sense? Yeah. But because of the limit, so there's 2 things, I'll get you in a second. There's 2 things about Bitcoin and most cryptocurrencies. I can't validate all of them, but I know Bitcoin has a built-in reduction of coins. So not only is there 13 million total, but over time, it reduces the amount of coins available. Now, I'm not saying tomorrow it goes to 0. We're talking like 150, 100 years in a generation. So it'll automatically have an appreciation or an inflation built into the value of Bitcoin. Add to that more people using it. Add to that more people saying, you know what, I don't trust the government. Now, maybe not in our world, but going to Venezuela or any of these other places where it's crazy. I want to put it all into Bitcoin and leave the country. That's always going to be there.
Well,
Shoot.
you just said blockchain and AI, artificial intelligence, that's what it uses to do its job.
Well, it's using math.
However, if it's going to keep on developing its artificial intelligence, everything's going to be out of our hands.
Well, so artificial intelligence is another unknown ripple in the technology. Blockchain does not need or use any AI.
Well,
Just-
doesn't it have
It's all
to
math.
determine,
It's all math. It's all
to
protocol. It's
learn
all-
from it, so?
It's all math. So the reconciliation is just math. It's saying, okay, here's the size of my blockchain down to the microbit. What's the size of your ledger? Yours is bigger. That means you have more new transactions. So let's all do the work and make sure those transactions are real. Yours is real, so now yours become But this is done simultaneously, so it's not like your computer is the only one doing the mining. There's probably 700,000 computers mining that exact piece of the blockchain that your computer in Phoenixville is. And if you're not fast, you're not going to get the reward for mining it. Whoever's the first one's going to get the reward.
What is the reward?
A piece of the thing you mined. So if you're mining Bitcoin, you get a piece of Bitcoin. Ethereum, same idea. Now, that is different if you're private, then you have a server farm. You don't have to pay. I mean, if you're IBM and you're doing, and IBM, a whole division based on blockchain. We're talking people just saying, okay, what do we do with this technology? And the guy that wrote it gets nothing for that, because that's not what he wrote. He wrote the Bitcoin technology, the Bitcoin blockchain. Does that make sense? Shoot.
I don't really understand how this is sustainable, due to the
Okay.
amount of resources and energy that are required. And there's not a limitless supply of energy in Iceland, and I understand they're running out.
Sure. So the sustainability, at a global level, the mining will end up being mined in the cheapest place to mine. So right now that's Iceland because their energy is geothermal and it's free to them. That same amount of work anywhere else has a cost that Pico would charge you for. So over time, either new technologies or cheaper technologies will come online. Whether they're cleaner or not, probably they may be. If it's free, more likely it's wave or wind. Or, if it's free, it's coming from the Mother Nature, so it's probably cheaper than if it's something that if it's dead dinosaur, it's going to have a cost to it in oil and natural gas. So over time, and it's already started, if you see where all the mining is being done, it's all clustering up in Iceland. Now whether it stays that way, but right now it is more socially, from an impact to the globe, it's more socially safe in Iceland than in New York City because the cost and the pollution just for where the energy is coming from. But there are infrastructure drains that this is going to have. Whether you want to use it or not, whether you trust it or not, it'll happen anyway. Just like the internet, even if you never want to use the internet, now you can't not use the internet. Your phone connects to the internet. So this will be just behind the scenes technology that we don't even know how far it's going to go. I would say that if you're going to invest in anything, consider it as speculative, be willing to lose all of it. Because tomorrow everyone could say, you know what, I don't want to do Bitcoin. But I can always count on people being having themselves, their own well-being as a priority. And I know people, I am people, I know people. So if the government says you can't have it, I bet you it'll spike the people that use it. Because they can't stop you from using it. The government can't stop me from going online and going to Coinbase and putting 100,000 in Bitcoin. They can't stop it. Now they can stop when they take it out, and the bank says, okay, this came from a Bitcoin address, and now is at, New Century Bank or Victor Bank, whatever your bank is, now we're going to tax it. That's not happening yet. And chances are, the government kind of likes it, because every transaction forever is part of the ledger forever. So if they really want to know where I am when I sent for that money, they're going to put a lot of resources. They're going to find out that address was given to some guy in Spring City, which is where I live. They might not know my address of my house, but they're going to be able to say, okay, we have a crime syndicate in Spring City because we have $700 million in Bitcoin going there. That's good for them. If you're doing bad stuff, you don't want that to happen. And so there's going to be we don't know where it's going to go, but the part that, at the basic level, if someone says, what is Bitcoin, what is cryptocurrency, the only thing you need to go back to is it ensures digital scarcity. What it uses that for, Bitcoin is currency, medium of exchange, a new shared hallucination, no different than the dollar, could be your medical files, what they use that insurance of digital scarcity, we've only just begun, because all of our worlds start to become digital. And so that's the interesting part. It is safer than having it all in one repository. It is not controlled by anybody, so it's not an Apple, it's not a Google, it's not a Microsoft. And I don't know if anyone would trust it if it was all Google or Apple, because it's not an open platform. But if anyone in the world can send Bitcoin and accept Bitcoin, and that is true today, and that probably will never not be true, because they can't, as long as you have a Wi-Fi connection, you can transact in this. Which means there's a lot less, if you think about dollars and fiat currency, there's a lot more regulation and stipulations on who can, I can't just send you $10,000, because if I did, I can do it, but then the bank says that's a suspicious activity, right? $10,000 over has to be reported. So if I send it to you at $9,999, that still has to be reported because it's suspicious. If I send you $5,000 today and $5,000 tomorrow, that has to be reported. If I'm using legitimate, banking infrastructure, I can send you $10 million in Bitcoin tomorrow and no one knows about it. Now, whether that's good or bad, well, if you got the $10 million, we'll do both of you. Shoot.
How do you evaluate and determine other cryptocurrencies?
I look at who's using them, and I look at
'Cause
why
there's
they're
a
being
lot,
used.
right? I mean,
There's a
it's-
ton. So Kodak's is being used to, to stamp photos. You would expect that of a Kodak. Ethereum is used as the intermediary to do those smart contracts. Bitcoin is the oldest, it's the largest, and in most cases it's the safest because it's in so many, we don't even know how many computers, how many miners, we have no idea how many versions of that Bitcoin blockchain ledger is in the world, but it's in the millions. So no one's going to ever be able to violate that, and so the biggest risk is called the 51% hack. If someone, whether it's the NSA, Russia, is able to change instantaneously the ledger on 51% of the computers that have the blockchain, then the math says, okay, everyone has this one, that's the right one. But the chances of that, I can't see. Physically, I couldn't comprehend that. And I think if any one entity is strong enough to do that, we have other issues.
Yeah.
Because they would have to know every computer. Shoot.
What impact, if any, will net neutrality have on the cryptocurrency?
So net neutrality, to back up for people that might not have heard about it, but basically it's the concept that in order for me as Comcast or Verizon to invest in faster internet, I need to be paid for it. And so I'm going to charge, and it's become legal and it's going back and forth, I'm going to charge people more for faster, better internet. And I can justify it by saying, I'm getting paid more, I'm going to make more money, there's a profit motive, so I'm going to invest more to give you faster internet. Now, that's kind of a fallacy, because if I'm Comcast and I deliver slow internet, you're going to go to where fast internet is anyway. So to me, I can't justify not having net neutrality, because I think the marketplace will say, okay, Verizon or Comcast, and Comcast doesn't, and I'm using this as an example, I don't really sold by Comcast. I will go, as a consumer, I will go to the faster internet for the price.
But sometimes that's not always available.
It's not always available.
I
And
mean, I
so
lived in Devon. Devon's on the main line.
you still don't get FiOS.
No.
Right. So in order for the FiOS of the world to justify putting the infrastructure into Devon, they want to be able to charge you for faster internet to make the decision that, okay, I will pay that for faster internet. And the sad part is the people that need the internet the most, the people that come to the library that don't have internet at home, the library internet probably won't be as fast as someone who pays for gigabit internet. And that's the issue. If you play this out, faster internet makes more money. I mean, faster internet, it's if we're on eBay trying to do an auction and you're using Mark's slow, 15 years from now, basic internet, and I paid for gigabyte internet or whatever they call quantum internet, who use quantum as, I'm going to outbid you every time. And the people that probably needed it the cheapest, the people that use the internet, are not going to get to it. So it doesn't really impact Bitcoin because the mining is done on the system. So it's not necessarily how fast the data gets to you, it's how fast you calculate the data and put it back on the blockchain. And if you're slower than you, for the same segment, you get paid and she doesn't. And eventually you say, you know what, I don't want to do it anymore because I'm spending these resources, real money. Because you have to have the hardware, you have to pay Pico, whether Pico doesn't care whether you got blockchain or not, whether you successfully mine the blockchain or not. So eventually, and this is what I did 3 years ago, I didn't want to break a $2,000 Mac because I wanted to make $25 in Bitcoin. It just did not make sense. Make sense? Shoot.
Well, you mentioned eBay and bidding, and it doesn't matter how fast you are. If somebody has the computer doing the bidding, they're going to win every time.
Sure.
So the computer is what's running this whole thing. It's
Sure.
like speed of light, and we haven't got a chance.
Sure. And so that was, So net neutrality, I think, impacts it, but at a very minor level, and it's another social impact of technology. I don't know how it's going to play out. I thought I wouldn't have an hour to talk about Bit and Pwn. I said, you can leave now without being rude and put your name down. I'll get you the PowerPoint. I told you we were going to get to the PowerPoint. I did not write the PowerPoint, but it was on a website for free information. And of all the things I've seen about blockchain, it was very informative. And I think it was written by a doctor in, like, Istanbul, but it's in English. And I scanned it. There's no viruses.
Are these same words going to be used in the future? Blockchain, ledger, mining?
I
By
don't
all these
think.
private companies that are going to invent new ways of using this?
So they probably will come up with a sexy version of their version of blockchain, but the technique behind it is going to be blockchain. Because blockchain is no different than TCP/IP, But if I want to monetize the, Kodak doesn't call their thing blockchain because it's not in the vernacular anymore. If all of us understand blockchain to a point where we know what that means, then you'll see it as, Xfinity blockchain or whatever they call it. Sure.
Every transaction in the world is between two entities is based on trust. So this is what this is all about. It's a trust system.
It's
Until-
because there's no trust, because he doesn't know I have the Eagles tickets, but I'm not gonna give it to him before he gives me the cash, and I don't know he has the cash. Blockchain will validate that.
I'm saying
and
it's
so-
a trust, it's a trusting system, a forcing
Thank you.
trusting system, until we reach that tipping point where it can be trusted.
Sure.
Well, but once it reaches that tipping point, then we're off to the races.
And some people would say that Bitcoin being 200 billion in value and 10 years old has already hit that. Because if it was gonna be broken into, it would have been broken into by now. Because who needs a bigger payday than $200 billion?
But I mean, the general public trusting.
Sure. So, and that's where, if you are going to vote digitally, you won't know that it's being used using the blockchain technology, but I guarantee you it will, because it's the only thing out there that does that data scarcity. So most of the things that you're going to touch in the next 5 years that use blockchain, unless you're buying Bitcoin, you won't even know it's blockchain behind the scenes. What you might know is that two companies merged and they lay off a third of their people.
The
And
people that get fired will know it's blockchain.
Yeah. Well, how do you not do my job? How do you not do my job? Who's doing those jobs? Those jobs still need to be done.
Mr. Blockchain.
Validating the data, validating the sources. So,
All those skill sets you talked about, HTML, for example, TCP/IP, you got IT guys out there learning it in college. Now, what course can I go to learn blockchain?
there's a ton of courses for blockchain.
Really?
Yeah. There's a huge amount of people working on blockchain. There are universities trying to catch up. I mean, this is kind of a, oh my God, what does that do? It's cutting edge, and we haven't seen anything yet. I mean, we haven't seen anyone adopt it like the iPod, where everyone uses it and we all know what it does, and it's 1,000 songs, and it's not that. And that's one of the reasons why people are saying 10,000 for Bitcoin. That's nothing. Because once people start once it's being used, whether people think they're using it or know they're using it, that's going to be, that's going to be the snowball. So, I would say regulation is a risk. Governments want to be taxed, but I think the government so far understand the cat's already out of the bag. If the government says you can never use Bitcoin, then nothing's going to stop me from just not turning it into fiat capital. I can move from blockchain or Bitcoin to Ethereum if I don't like Bitcoin, if it's too volatile. If they're going to regulate it so they will tax it when it shows up at my bank, I never have to make it fiat capital, which the government would hate, because that's the only thing they can control, it's the only thing they know is out there. So I don't see, not on wood, I don't think they can do anything about it other than regulate how it's taxed. But just like they didn't tax the internet until it was everywhere, I think they're going to wait and see how this thing plays out. And it might not be Bitcoin, it might be Ethereum, it might be one that we haven't even seen. Thank you, this was fun. Any other questions? I'm here, kids are in bed, so I don't have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.